everyone, Grubby Phil here. This is the first in a new series. So I do a series called Movies Should Be Fun, which are all about action films and big silly films. This is going to be a slightly more subdued series about sci-fi, and more specifically, I think action movies should be big and fun and like ridiculous. I think sci-fi should make you think and be serious. Well, not all the time, but I think it should deal with issues and not just be pa blow stuff up. So, fitting first video, as you can see from the insignia I'm wearing, we're going to talk about Star Trek. More specifically, we're going to talk about Star Trek Discovery, which just premiered on Netflix for me in this country and CBS All Access in America. Wow, first new series of Star Trek on TV, back where it really belongs in quite a while, since Enterprise. Before I get into nitpicking, I'm happy, you know, I'm really happy. I wasn't a big fan of the JJ verse movies, the Kelvin verse movies. The first one I find watchable, it's good fun. I don't really consider it Star Trek really, but it's a fun riff on Star Trek. The second one I really try to avoid, and the third one I feel similarly to the first one. I can watch them, I can enjoy them as films, but I wouldn't say, for example, they were particularly thoughtful. So, I was trepidatious, I suppose, about this new series, especially as you had some involvement from the movie team, but you also had involvement from Nicholas Meyer, you know, which is bound to make you feel good about things. So I was happy. I was one of those, I wasn't shouting about it, I wasn't too worried, I wasn't like, oh no, I'll never watch it. I am generally of the opinion that Star Trek should have moved forward, not done another prequel show. When I found out it was a prequel show, I thought, okay, not what I would have chosen, but I still want to watch it, and I hope it's good, and I hope it adds something to mythology in the story. So far, it's looking like it might. Yes, it seems to be about war, which is, again, not my favorite subject for Star Trek, because I tend to go to Star Trek to avoid that sort of thing. But it looks like they're handling it intelligently. You know, it's not just, yeah, pow, 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 boo, boo, boo. I don't like that in my sci-fi. My movie should be fun. That's what I want. My thoughtful sci-fi. That's not what I'm looking for. You know, so they have a Klingon Empire, guy seeking to unite the houses. There's not going to be too many spoilers in this, but there are going to be some, so you should probably watch it first. He's a xenophobe, you know, he's a racial Puritan, and but it's explored. He's not a sort of mustache twirling villain. It's the Klingons have always been a little bit xenophobic, but it's given a real ideology here. It's something they believe in. It's something they have passion in. Obviously, it's at complete odds with the Federation and their inclusivity, their multiculturalism. You know, IDIC, infinite diversity and infinite combinations. And I like that it looks like we're going to be exploring the difference, you know, the tensions with those two ideologies meeting. The Klingons have perhaps been overused in Star Trek, but it does seem we're going at them with a new angle. Now, I don't love the redesign of the Klingons. I always liked the warrior long hair. But what I was really happy about is if you kind of close your eyes, everything that was happening was very Klingon. You know, they were talking about Kalas, they were talking about houses, honor, but perhaps in a more nuanced way, whereas you could argue the Klingons had become slightly caricature-like in the sort of next-gen Deep Space Nine era. It was all just honor, honor, honor. And I love the Klingons, but they do seem to be given a bit more nuance here. They seem like a slightly more three-dimensional group of people. A lot remains to be seen. We've only seen the first 2 episodes, but that's my hope. That's certainly what the producers have said, that they're not just going to be cut-out villains. They're going to be people with motivations and ideologies that, yes, we will disagree with, or hopefully we will disagree with, but they will have a point of view that makes sense to them, and that'll be up against the Starfleet ideology, which, you know, they will have to defend and fight for. So, the characters, I pretty much liked all of them. I'm not convinced we needed a Sarek. I think it sort of creates a bit of a small universe syndrome. I'm happy with Burnham being raised on Vulcan and attending the Vulcan Science Academy and everything. I'm just sort of pretending it's another Vulcan called Sarek who doesn't happen to be Spock's dad. I'm sure in future I might not be able to cling on to that luxury because they might tie things in. And maybe to a positive way, maybe in a good way. I just feel like there are many Vulcans. We kind of know about Sarek and his son Spock, and then we suddenly had Cybok, and now we suddenly got Michael Burnham. So I think it could have been another Vulcan, but it's not the end of the world. As many of us suspected, Michelle Yeoh's character didn't last, but she was very good in this. She was very good. The Shenshao was a good ship, but that didn't last. So we haven't seen the Discovery yet. So it was a pilot, but it was almost a sort of prequel to itself, because we haven't met Captain Lorca, we haven't met the main ship. We've seen it in the opening titles, which are different type of opening titles, but I'm glad they didn't go with a song again. I like that it's back to some music with a couple of original Trek hints. The sound effects, they've got some original nods in there. Some of them are a little bit too Kelvin-verse for my liking, but they're not bad. Overall, I think this will be a thoughtful series. At least I'm hopeful it will. We had Michael Burnham clashing with her captain on how things should be done, and people getting quite emotional about that, but in a relatively mature way. Their actions were thought out, you know, it made sense to them. It was dramatic, but it didn't seem like it was done purely for the conflict and the drama between the characters. Obviously, they're breaking with the whole sort of Roddenberry rule about there being no interpersonal conflict, although, of course, that didn't really come until the Next Generation, which this is set quite a long time before. But what I like so far is that it seems the producers have been true to their word, that the conflict between people there is not petty, and it's also looked to be resolved in logical and sensible ways. And that's good. That's what I do want in my Star Trek. You know, no conflict at all can be difficult, although I love the sentiment. I love that idea that Gene had, that we would move beyond that, and I truly hope we do one day. But it is good to see how we might get to that point, how we might start to resolve our conflict better, still have conflict, but sort through it. And perhaps, you know, that could be an interpretation of what he meant all along. It's not that we'll never disagree with each other. It's that when we do, we will be able to sort it out in a mature and adult fashion. Something that particularly right now, very topical, we don't seem to be able to do. So I really like the ship designs. I mean, fitting them into canon is a little, yeah, but you know, the Enterprise is an old ship by the original series, so technically some of these ships we saw with the non-circular nacelles could actually be newer than the Enterprise and kind of be precursors to the motion picture refit. So, you know, you can sort of work it. I love the phasers and the communicators, you know, how they tie in with the original series, a little bit of updating. I'm not 100% on the uniforms yet. There's nothing wrong with them. I don't hate them. I can watch it. I love the insignia badges they have. The uniforms themselves, I think, could have been a little less gold shiny, but, you know, it's far from a deal breaker. They do look good. The sets are fantastic. I'm hoping the lens flares die down a bit. There was sort of justification for them in this episode with the big Klingon beacon, but that's not an aspect of the new films I would like to see stay. Let's sort of calm down a little on that. Saru, I wasn't convinced by with the images and the trailer. That line about predicting death I didn't think was particularly great, and it's the one they included in the trailer. But having seen him in the first two episodes, I feel like he's going to be a favorite of mine. I really liked Saru. He has a nice calming way about him. He's very much sort of the Spock of the show, but without being a mimic of Spock and without being a Vulcan, being a slightly different species. I really liked him. The one thing that I perhaps liked least was the kind of interlight-year mental mind meld Michael Burnham had with Sarek that was sort of explained by apparently having some of his kata in her. I didn't really like that. In everything we know about Vulcans and mind melds, which is already quite mystical, that was a jump too far for me. You know, it could have just been a dream or a little bit of a vision, a sort of hallucination, you know, receiving wisdom that she'd basically already received, but her envisioning Sarek and what he might say to her, I'd have been fine with all that, you know, her brain working through these issues. But it seemed to be as if that was meant to actually be Sarek communicating with her. I wasn't too keen on that. There are canon problems, you know, they have holographic communication, things like that we didn't see until Deep Space Nine. But I'm not one of the people who gets too worked up about that. I think if we want a new audience for Star Trek and we want to have people keep watching, if everyone's communicating on tiny little triangular shaped screens, no one's going to buy it. We're going to go, oh yes, like the original series. But really it's not realistic, and Star Trek is meant to be our future. The original series was our future envisioned from the 60s. The Next Generation was very much our future envisioned in the late 90s, and we can't get too stuck to the aesthetic, I don't think. The stories and the philosophy is more important than that. Again, this would have been solved if we'd moved forward in time, perhaps, but we haven't, so we'll see how it goes. Moving forward, I can't wait to see the Discovery properly, meet Captain Lorca, see how Michael Burnham gets out of her life sentence which I feel like might have been a little harsh. I think discharge and I don't know, maybe it's not harsh. We'll see how she gets out of that. That'll be interesting. And how Saru and some others end up in the Discovery. Perhaps just reassignment. We don't know how much time will have passed. So overall, this was relatively thoughtful. Obviously, it was quite action-packed. It was the pilot. It was the first one. But it had enough in there. It had stuff about not judging people by race, the difference between a race and a culture. It had ideologies. It had different points of view within more or less one ideology. So all that stuff is very Star Trek, but it handled it in quite a nuanced way. You know, original Star Trek and some Next Generation, because they're individual stories, they're morality plays. Things can be very black and white. People's opinions can be quite exaggerated in a way that works very well as a sort of parable. But as this is going to be the more long-form storytelling that we're used to with TV now, which is cool, it gives us a chance to be a bit more nuanced. And I'm excited about seeing Star Trek done in that format. I personally think that format has started to be used a little bit too much in everything, and sometimes it's nice just to put an episode of something on. You know, I loved the new Battlestar Galactica, but I almost never watch it again, whereas I watch episodes of different Star Trek series all the time because you can just watch them and say, ah, cool, that was a nice self-contained story. But I am excited to see Star Trek work in the sort of long arc form, because aside from hints with Deep Space Nine, we haven't really seen that, and I think Star Trek lends itself really well to that sort of complex storytelling. So hopefully this will be a real positive. So Star Trek Discovery, based on the first 2 episodes, gets a big thumbs up for me. To be honest, Star Trek pilots historically have not been particularly brilliant. The best one is probably Broken Bow from Star Trek Enterprise, which wasn't the best series, but this one might be better. You know, Encounter at Farpoint is an interesting episode and introduces us to Q in the Next Generation, vitally important. It's not a great episode. You know, The Cage is ropey at times. The Emissary in Deep Space Nine is quite good, and The Caretaker is quite good. So they've been getting better, but this one is probably the best. I think it's hard to judge when you haven't seen where it's going, and when this pilot, or double pilot, didn't even introduce us to what we know will be a lot of the regular cast. It's a different sort of pilot in that sense. But I like that. It got me interested in the world. It got me interested in our main character, Michael Burnham. And I want to see what's going to happen next. So Star Trek Discovery is exciting me right now. And I haven't been excited by Star Trek in quite a long time. You know, not since the 2009 reboot was coming. And even that, I wasn't overly excited about, because I don't think a reboot like that is the way to go. I think rebooting Star Trek could be a really interesting idea, but I think you have to completely reboot it. No familiar characters, probably not even call the ship Enterprise. Just go with the basic concept of the Federation and a starship exploring space, and, you know, there being some relationships with other alien races, and just new characters, new situations. That sort of reboot I could really get behind, but I know Kirk, Spock, and Bones. I know them from the original series. I know them from the movies. The Kelvinverse movies are a fun distraction. Discovery feels like a return to real Star Trek. It's in the prime timeline. That needs a little bit of mental jostling to fit in, mainly because of the aesthetics, though. But I'm less concerned about that. If these stories and this method of storytelling and the messages of this new Star Trek tie in with what Star Trek is to me, I'll be really happy. It seems like it might do. I'm cautiously optimistic, but after these 2 episodes, cautiously very optimistic, or less cautiously optimistic, because they've made a great opener. So let's hope they only go up from here. This has been Grubby Phil in the first episode of Thoughtful Sci-Fi, where I will talk about Star Trek Discovery, almost definitely, and other sci-fi, both new and old, that really makes you think, a bit more thoughtful than my Movies Should Be Fun series. Anyway, check it out.